There sure are a lot of video games out there, aren't they? Maybe too many if you look at the weekly release list on Steam. If you remember, we used to have a show about the weekly release list on Steam. We don't, because Raul would have died if he tried to make it anymore. However, there are some games that we kind of feel should exist. And these are the top 7 games that need to happen. A show dedicated to all those video games that I personally believe should come into being, should be created for all to enjoy if they happen to have the same taste in video games as I do. If not, well, it's your loss. I think I have some really good ideas for games that should exist. But oh god, am I not gonna be the one to make them. So let's begin with number 7. A historic racing game. Now I'm certain I've said this like 3 or 4 times in previous shows, probably a show very similar to this one, but we kinda could use a few more historic racing games. Games that are about you playing through a history of racing cars. Maybe not tied to a specific brand of cars like we saw in several games in the past, like my all-time favorite Need for Speed 5 Porsche Unleashed /2000, because that's what they call it in Europe. A game like this would work phenomenally because you have a story built in there that will last the test of time, because you're telling the story of cars. That's the best story a racing game could ever tell. Not some story about an undercover officer that goes undercover to bust the undercover ground racing illegal street. Why does that guy look like Gordon Freeman? No, the best story a racing game can tell is about you driving the car. Nothing can be better than that, because that's gonna be your story always. And you driving the car from when the car was made to the present, that is the best journey that story can go on. Especially if it's not done in a forced way, in the sense that, oh, you're at a new era now, yeah. None of the cars you previously had exist or are of any use anymore. No, still have them around, still have them be useful for some races, like some historic race. Basically what Need for Speed Porsche did, because it did that very well. Just do it with more types of cars, more tracks, more eras, just more of everything. But maybe not really super duper more on the graphics side, in the sense that I made this fake screenshot with what Need for Speed 5 would have looked like if it was made today. That being around 3 or 4 years ago. So it shouldn't look like that in terms of effects. As for what studio could actually make this game, well, that's a bit of a tricky situation right there. From what I played of the Forza series, I think Turn 10 could pull it off. I was also gonna say that maybe the people that made Driver San Francisco or Test Drive Unlimited could also do it, but they were Ubisofted to death, so maybe not. Number 6. A physics-based shooter. Now, if you think back to the ages of the initial 3D shooters, there was a thing called Quake where if you shot something, you'd see a bullet go out of your gun and shoot that thing. And if that thing moved, well, the bullet didn't hit it. That was the beginning of the physical-based shooter, where it wasn't hit scan, it wasn't simply about you placing the cursor on the screen and pressing click, or you didn't actually have cursors back then, because stuff like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D were 2D, so you just pointed the screen in the general direction of the enemy and pressed fire. But anyway, that's not what I'm referring to when I say a physically based shooter, a physics-based shooter. So it's part of it. A ballistic simulation in it is important, but I'm referring to what me and Steven discussed about in the podcast last week in the FPS episode of Game Tales. That is, a shooter where you can shoot things and they fall, like leaves in fall. The idea being that you could shoot walls and blow up the terrain until you're able to make your own cover out of what used to be there. We already sort of have that in a limited capacity in Battlefield, and there was that demonstration that was built on the Unreal 3 engine from way back in the day when AGA was still a thing. We could blow up the entire map, and there were dust storms and sort of particle effects, things that actually affected the environment. And it does actually go all the way back to to the original Prey. I mean, the one that was never made. The one that got remade into the Prey that we know. The one with the portals, with the sphere thing, the one that then got remade into System Shock by Arcane. It had the idea of you being able to blow up the environment and use it to your own advantage. Well, we're at the level where we can do that, aren't we? I mean, we have DMM. We've had DMM for ages. We now have 8 core CPUs in the mainstream. Again, I'm gonna underline this again. I'm gonna say it slower. 8 core. And usually 16 thread CPUs in the mainstream for prices that are not super duper ultra mega double oxy ribonucleically super duper expensive. And consoles already have 8 core CPUs. They're gonna have even better ones in the next generation because they're gonna switch to Ryzen instead of Bulldozer or Jaguar, which was based off Bulldozer. And from that, you would have the resources to dedicate a couple of cores to just the processing of the physics. Heck, we have OpenCL, we have CUDA, we can do that, and the graphics part as well. You can marry them together so they'll actually create a world that's functionally, physically based, and you can actually interact with it in terms of shooting stuff and explosions in a physical way. And again, it's not a new concept. We've seen that to a very limited degree in the Red Faction series, where either the ground was destructible or the buildings were destructible. We even saw it in a sort of terrain modification way, and that really obscure and not really all that well-selling game that sort of contributed to the downfall of LucasArts called Fracture, which for some reason, they got war veterans, I think it was a World War II veteran, or maybe a Vietnam War veteran, to talk with them about the combat applications of a grenade that can change the elevation of the terrain under your feet. And that was in the trailer they had, presenting the game. And it was the dumbest thing possible. What did they want that person to say? Oh yeah, we've had this back in the war. Sure would have been something. They got laser bombs too, and laser missiles. Yeah, sure, that would have changed the war. Flying cars, yeah, that would work too. Technologically, I believe it is doable. And who could do it? Well, Valve hasn't made a game in a couple of years, have they? Like a really good one that people are interested in, right? But could Valve actually make a game anymore? I mean, if you read some of the things that former employees are saying, it's kind of a disaster on the inside. Who knows? I think they could have pulled it off. I mean, they were big into the physics-based thing with Half-Life 2 and Portal, so this would be just a logical next step. Or if not, then Volition, you were some of the people that started it, so it's up to you to finish it. Number 5, a Star Wars XCOM style game. I'm not the first person to suggest this. I know this for a fact because I found somebody else suggesting it on the web not that long ago. So why would this work? Well, think about it. You can play as the rebels fighting against the Empire in an insurrection-style combat scenario with a very, very long war of guerrilla warfare across the galaxy, gathering recruits, sending them off to die most likely, fighting against stormtroopers with, they're probably gonna aim a bit better than they do in the, in the first movie. They had a reason they weren't shooting properly. It's because Vader told them, yo, bitches, I want them to take me to their base. If you shoot them, I will strangle you with the Force from the other side of the galaxy alongside everyone you love. I don't care if they kill you. I will do worse than kill you. Naturally, everybody involved with making movies forgot about that, and the stormtroopers were just crap for the last 50 years or something. But yeah, you would be fighting against them. I don't know, maybe you could have it in a mode where you would be playing as a troop of stormtroopers. I was thinking of having the geoscape component be similar to the one that you would find in Star Wars Empire at War, the RTS made by Petroglyph. You'd have planets you could develop and hire contacts on and gather resources from. And it would also have the intercept component, which you could have it be like a sort of arcade-ish, watered-down version of X-Wing. I mean, anything is better than what XCOM 1 had, the reboot. They couldn't even remove it in XCOM 2 because why wouldn't they? So what I'm saying is XCOM, but with Star Wars. It's a winning concept. I mean, they're making one with Gears of War, and nobody actually cares about Gears of War anymore. I don't think anybody ever did. They're just waiting for Halo, and now we know there's more Halo coming out, so why bother? And who could make this game? Well, I'm kind of waiting to see what Phoenix Point turns out to be, because if Phoenix Point turns out well, and thankfully I should have access to a backup build, but I've not asked anybody about it, like in ever. But if it turns out good, then Snapshot Games would have a really good shot at making it. Not Firaxis though, because Firaxis' XCOM sort of is lacking in the core mechanics. Number 4, a proper single-player Magic the Gathering game. And I mean a proper follow-up to Chandalar. Well, we call it Chandalar, but it was just called Magic the Gathering. It was the single-player, well, it did get an add-on for multiplayer as well, but it was a single-player Magic the Gathering game made by Microprose. It was one of the last, and not the exact last game on which Sid Meier worked on, before he left the company with a bunch of other people to found Firaxis, back when Firaxis was Ferasum. And what I want most from a single-player Magic the Gathering game is that component of building up the world lore and actually giving you something to do in the world, not just a succession of unconnected or connected via a very, very not interesting story blurb text that you can skip, but interconnected through a world. In Chandalar, you would travel around the world, you would fight different creatures to collect cards because they were the emissaries of the wizards that were trying to take over the world. And you had a limited time to actually get things done. If you didn't, well, you'd find cities that were being attacked and conquered, thereby increasing the power of the wizards. You'd make your job harder. You would have to go into dungeons and fight a lot of creatures and never lose once if you hope to get to the end and get the cards that were kind of rare. And I mean rare to the point where you couldn't find them outside of dungeons. The really good stuff you had to work for. It was more than just the card game. It was the card game in the context of a world. And in terms of world building, actually, Chandalar did not do a great job. Didn't really tell you much about the super duper complicated multi-world who the hell is Azra and Uzra and what's a planeswalker and what did they do stuff thing. But to be fair, that was because back then there wasn't a lot of the lore we have now. Things were still at their beginning, at their inception. We were still using alpha art for cards. So they could do a lot more now. They could make like a superb sprawling campaign, maybe with characters even. I don't know. There is potential there. And as for who should make it, well, here's the thing. It's kind of hard to screw it up in terms of gameplay, because in terms of gameplay, it's Magic the Gathering. The book writes itself. Well, technically, no, the book was written by Wizards of the Coast, and they will murder you if you make any modifications to it. So kind of any studio with enough talent at building the world and rudimentary talent at building the rest of it would be able to do it. So I would say that maybe Obsidian should give it a try, because, you know, it has Tim Kaine, has Leonard Boyarsky, Avalon could come back if Fergus stops hiring his relatives and fires actual creative people to keep his relatives on payroll. Turns out Obsidian is run quite badly, and the reasons why it kept sort of getting into trouble financially was because of the people in charge, not necessarily because of the evil publishers. It was just really badly managed, to the point where Chris Avalon kind of left because of that. He was sick and tired of it, and he's not shy about expressing his views about it. Have you seen the posts on RPG Codex? You should go read them. There's a lot there. But still, I think they could probably make Chandalar 2. Or it's probably not going to be called Chandalar. It's, what is it? They're Dominarian now? Just make Magic the Gathering World or something. Number 3. An actual proper Christian Allegory game. Now, I know that this is kind of a curveball, but hear me out on this. Now, if you don't know, I'm from Eastern Europe. In Eastern Europe, everybody is by default Orthodox Christian. We don't have a choice in the matter. We are born into that society, and we are consistently told that Jesus and God's gonna kill you if you do something bad and blah 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 blah, love all around. But stay under the boot of the church or we will get you into hell in an express elevator filled with molten lava and spikes or something, I don't know. And because of that, you kind of notice things. You kind of notice when Mass Effect is a really crappy allegory for Jesus. And I mean, dear God, was it crappy. I mean, it started with the second one. The first one, yeah, you kind of saw where they were going, but with the second one, they really sort of pushed it with the 12 apostles and having a halo around them saved them because they started believing in the shepherd. And it sort of culminated at the end with the sacrifice of shepherd and then calling him right in the final sequence, tell me another story about the shepherd. Wow. That was a really crappy, it was so, I think the expression is on the nose, but in your face, pushy and preachy would probably be a bit better. Which is kind of a shame because as mythologies goes, Christianity does have a lot of it. And I don't see why they can't make a proper game based on Christian mythology when we have fantastic movies based on it. We have RoboCop, which is an allegory for Christ. We have Man of Steel, which is a goddamn piece of crap. Oh God, do not make that. That's basically the same level as Mass Effect. But we have the Excalibur movie. That's kind of Christ figure-y in its essence. In a way, you could also say that the Ultima series is also about that, but it's been like 50 years since Ultima was released. Or it seems like it was, because a lot of people seem to have forgotten how great that series was. So making a new one, not an Ultima game, but a game that's based around the idea of Christianity, maybe veiled a bit, I think that would work. I mean, we have Norse games that turn out to be fantastic. And they're also about gods and heroes of the past and somehow a Greek guy fathering, thing in God of War 4 stuff. You could still do a lot with this idea. As for who could do it properly, I know for a fact BioWare cannot. They've tried, oh God, did it turn out bad? And again, I would kind of point towards Obsidian maybe, if Chris Avellone were still there. But without that, then I'm not exactly sure who could pull it off. Who could do it in a non-preachy, this is salvation kind of piece of garbage. But an actual earnest attempt to discuss a mythology, an ideology through a video game. If you know a studio that could make that, make sure to mention it in the comments. It has to be a studio that still exists because otherwise I would have said Troika, which in a way, well, bits of Troika are now in Obsidian, so who knows. Speaking of Troika, number 2, an open world vampire survival game. Now, I know that we just got Vampire by Don't Nod, and I've seen some mixed reactions to it. It seems like it's a good vampire game, but you don't actually need to feed, you just do it to get experience, so kind of fails. Also kind of heard that the combat is sort of at the same level as in that game nobody remembers about anything. And in a way, you could say that Skyrim would sort of fit the bill because you do get to play as a vampire if you choose to go on a quest and find vampirism and embrace Satan or something, and then become a vampire that has the abilities of a vampire and the disadvantages of one, but it's still Skyrim. And it's not the kind of sucking you want in terms of vampirism, is it? So what I propose is a game where you flat out start as a vampire, like in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. But from the beginning, you are on your own. There is no Camarilla, there is no masquerade that you know of. You sort of have to learn the ropes by going through the world and seeing what sticks. For example, can I step out in the sunlight? Oh no, I just burst into flames. I'm almost dead. Oh, I am dead again. What happens if I bite this person? Oh, turns out he was a secret vampire hunter, probably looking for the vampire that spawned me, so I probably shouldn't have been feeding like right here at the beginning. No, I should go away. I should have like feeding spots that I sometimes go to and then never touch again because some vampire hunters may come there. And it could be placed in like many different time periods. You could even have an evolving time period. Like that would be amazing if it's doable. I mean, you're a vampire, you're immortal, you could just go into Tropor and sort of do the Vampire the Masquerade Redemption thing where you stand in a coffin for a couple of centuries and just chill out until people get machine guns and assault rifles that will shoot you even better. And it has to be a survival game because, let's face it, as a vampire, you're gonna have a hard time at the beginning. Yeah, you're gonna become powerful. You're gonna become like super duper Terror of the Night, Alucard, and Helsing levels of awesome one day, maybe. But until then, you're gonna be eating some rats, aren't you? You're gonna be hiding, you're gonna be skulking, you're gonna be trying your best to not really interfere with things. There can be an overarching story about, I don't know, the antediluvians waking up. It could be set in the Masquerade, the White Wolf, book series of RPGs. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, Paradox Interactive. It could feature things like you needing to control your hunger, otherwise the beast will come out and devour everybody around, and you getting shot in the face by all the police or vampire hunters or just people with guns, because there's a lot of them around. There's potential to this idea. I mean, survival games may have faded a bit in favor because of Battle Royale, but there's still a bit of a thing, and if you combine them with an RPG system in a single player game with no zombies around and make them based on the idea that you are a vampire that must survive a world that is not really built for vampires because the sun will murder you, as well as other things. I don't know, you don't have a reflection, maybe you can't cross running water unless you have an upgrade or something. In terms of challenge, and then inevitably a reward for your challenge with the getting to the Alucard level of powers, I think it could be a very, very attractive game concept with a gameplay loop that will make you sort of want to play more and replay. And who could make it? Well, honestly, probably CD Projekt. I mean, they already have expertise with vampires and open world and stuff. Not with survival yet, but they could get there one day. And the number one game that should exist is T-Rain. T-Rain, for those who don't know, don't mind the World of Warcraft in the background. I didn't find anything that's close to it. So T-Rain is a video game that shows up in the book Reamd by Neil Stevenson. In the book, the creators of the game made it as a means, primarily as a means to turn a profit on gold farming. There are basically two types of characters in the game. They're the resource gatherers. They require basically nothing to maintain. They don't need weapons, they don't need gear, they don't need anything. They just go around and work. And the other type of character is the warrior, the combat character. Those characters are the fun ones. But to maintain one, you need a lot of money that you can get either by mining it, by collecting resources, or by paying gold farmers to do it for you. And you may say to yourself, well, that sounds like an awful concept for a game. Why would you even suggest this needing to exist? I mean, there's a lot of games with gold farmers already. Why would this one be different? Well, the scale of the game is the Earth. I mean, the map of it is the size of a planet, and it's made with a level of detail in its simulation that it was created by, in the context of the book, by somebody obsessed with geology. Somebody that made an algorithm to create actual geology because he got pissed every time he saw stupid geology in video games. So he made a system that just generates geology and geography and flora and fauna that is believable and is scale accurate to a planet. And it's not just the surface, it's what's under the surface. With what you can mine, the gold, for example, the jewels, the real materials, actually being in the earth in a limited supply. Technologically, imagine if EverQuest Next actually got made, or if somebody used No Man's Sky's terrain generator for good instead of evil. It's that kind of idea. Well, technically, I think space engineers can also make sort of almost super duper accurate planets at this point. Not entirely sure. And the main attraction, I mean, besides this, if you're not a geology enthusiast, is that the game works on a bit of a common sense kind of idea, meaning that there is no super duper instant teleportation that lets you go everywhere. There are ley lines that let you teleport from place to place, but in sort of rare occurrences. I mean, it's not everywhere. It's in predefined places, some places around the world. And the world is big enough that between those places, there are thousands of miles of nothing. I mean, nothing in the sense of there's no other way to get there other than walking. Or if you have a more powerful character, flying. And it's the idea that having realistic proportions to a world will do stuff to it. You can hide out in places, you can find places that you can go there and not be bothered by others, or while exploring you can find people in places and, you know, do stuff to them, because the game had the sort of a full drop system if the player that got down did not act in a manner in which you'll let them keep their loot after they got killed. And again, if this still doesn't sound all that awesome, what is awesome is that the game lets you become insanely powerful. And not in the sense that, oh, I can deal 5 million damage. No. In the sense that there are spells in the game that will let you raise the earth beneath you, sort of pick up other players like they were ants and your hand was the earth, and then just tower above them with a projection of your face in the sky. Characters can get insanely powerful as well. They can gain the ability to fly or at least run at the speed of sound or even more than that. But they can also disguise themselves as being a lower power character. They can have words upon them, they can have invisibility upon them, and all these spells have chances of failure regardless of their level. Actually, I think the higher the level, the higher the chance of failure was, meaning that a lower level character will always have like the slightest chance of always beating a high level character, unless it was something that was like really overpowered. Like I forgot the name of the character that the creator made, like one of the oldest characters in the game. That one basically had no chance of ever being defeated by pretty much anybody. It had gotten the level where it was immune to most damage, and characters could get to that level, could attain that sheer brute power, and in the process shape the world, because everything could be changed, everything could be modified. You could call down a meteor and just blast the town apart, and there was the idea of an ever-evolving story written by some of the actions of the players as well as the writing of the writers hired to actually populate the world with lore and stuff. And because it was a more common sense approach in terms of game design, you couldn't really talk to people that were on the other side of the world all that much. Like you needed to be right next to them for the most part, unless you had spells that dealt with that or shot arrows with messages on them and they were like in range. It was meant to be believable up to a point, I mean. And it sounds like a game that would have been awesome even though it would have been purposefully built to be filled with gold farmers. And I think this kind of game actually can succeed because gold farming is still big. I know people have cracked down on it, but it still has the potential of doing quite well. And also, the core idea of it, the way that your characters can evolve, the amount of tools and spells they had at their disposal described in the book, which is not a book about a video game, it's a book about international terrorism from a certain point. It sounds amazing, the game, I mean, not the terrorism, in terms of what it can offer you, what options you can have. Like one of the main plot points of the part of it that covers the game is a war waged between two factions, one of which is described as the Earth Tone Coalition, and one of them is the Bright Color Coalition or something like that, the Bright Color Alliance. It's basically people drawing a line in the sand and taking sides depending on how they chose to dress their characters, whether they were trying to approach it from a more sensible, setting appropriate, more realistic colors, or just have the most bright, garish, unattainable, up to a point colors possible. And that sparked a war, and the developers were trying their best to find an excuse for why that war exists in the lore. Reminds me a bit of what Ashram Call sort of almost did with an expansion, where the only way the expansion could proceed in terms of storyline was if a group of players destroyed a crystal or something that triggered the next expansion storyline. And that happened in most servers, but on one server a group of players decided to kill anybody that tried to destroy that crystal, and they just tried to keep the story from progressing. They eventually didn't have a choice because it was still kind of a theme park MMO, but in T-Rain the story would have had to adapt. Now making this game is a phenomenally difficult job, like who god. It would make EverQuest Next seem like child's play. So who could do it? Old Blizzard could. The Blizzard before they decided to not try anymore. The Blizzard that made World of Warcraft when it was great. Not the Blizzard that made Diablo 3. That Blizzard, I wouldn't trust that Blizzard to do much. Also, you should probably read ReMD. It'll throw you for a loop a couple of times because, well, like most Neil Stephenson books, you won't know exactly when the plot starts. So that would be my suggestions for the top 7 games that need to happen. If you have your own, well, the comments are right there for you. And oh my god, this show has been long. Goodbye.